All right. Happy Wednesday, everyone. I wanted to do this live to clear up some confusion around hormones and fat burning. So, the first thing that you need to remember if you want to lose weight is that you need to start tapping into body fat. That's the only way you're going to lose weight is to get the fat that you have, get it off of your body. Now, in order for that to happen, and this is what a lot of women don't fully understand, in order for that to happen, two things need to happen at the same time. At the same time, you need to have a hormonal balance. And what I mean, and I'm going to explain it in a little bit, but what I mean by hormonal balance is I am primarily speaking of metabolic hormones. Your metabolic hormones need to be in the right place. At the same time that your hormones are in the right place, you need to get into a caloric deficit. So the problem with a lot of programs and diets out there is that they only focus on one or the other. They may only look at hormones, especially some of the lower carb community. They kind of say, don't even worry about calories, just eat this way so that your hormones can start tapping into body fat. On the flip side of things, there's also a lot of programs out there that kind of give you this impression that you can kind of eat whatever as long as you stay within a caloric range or as long as you count your calories. So both are correct, but yet at the same time, both are also incorrect because the two need to happen simultaneously. So a lot of women come to me, they say, how do I know if I am in the right metabolic hormonal balance to start tapping into body fat? Well, the first hormone that you want to look at is insulin. So if you have a lot of insulin floating around in your bloodstream, then your body will not be in a position to start tapping into fat stores. Insulin is kind of known as the fat storage hormone, and it is elevated every single time we eat something. It's especially elevated if we eat anything with a lot of carbs or sugar. But if you're somebody who just naturally, or not naturally, but if you're just somebody who has kind of a high insulin all the time, which is known as insulin resistance, by the way, and an extreme version of that would be like type 2 diabetes. If that's you, then you're gonna have a really hard time tapping into body fat. So a lot of women don't even know if they are insulin resistant or if they have a high fasting insulin. And the only way to know for sure is to get a blood test, a fasting insulin blood test, where you've been fasting overnight, you go and get your blood tested, you get your insulin level tested. And if that is anything over a 9, I would say you are somebody who has too high of a fasting insulin, and it's going to be really hard to start tapping into body fat. The other hormone that I want you to look at besides insulin is leptin. Now, leptin is a hormone that is created in our fat cells, and it talks to our brain. It tells our brain how much fat we have on our body. See, your body doesn't want to be overweight. Your body doesn't want to have excess body fat. So there is a built-in mechanism to have your fat tell your brain when you have too much fat. And when you have too much fat, your brain will shut down your appetite and it will amp up your metabolism and get you kind of in a fat burning mode. Now, the problem is that for a lot of us out there who are struggling to lose weight, our leptin brain connection is not working. It's dysfunctional. So if you get your leptin tested and that is also high, then that is another reason why you can't start tapping into body fat. Your leptin is too high. So those are the two main hormones that you want to look at if you're struggling to lose weight. There's a lot of others, but those are the two that you really want to start with and pay attention to. And by the way, those of you that are joining, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them up. But for those of you who kind of joined a little bit late, we're talking about hormones and fat burning after the age of 40. So you may be asking, well, if I do have a high insulin, and if I do have a high leptin, or I'm leptin resistant or insulin resistant, that's another word you can use to describe that, what do I do about it? Well, the good news is this is absolutely 100% fixable, reversible. And it doesn't necessarily require a ton of time. It doesn't require any sort of medical intervention. If you want to get your insulin and leptin down to a level so that you can start tapping into body fat, I tell my clients there's two main things you need to keep in mind at all times. You need to eat less frequently, which is counterintuitive to what we've been told. I understand that. You need to eat less frequently, and you need to lower your carb intake. Those two things will begin to reverse that metabolic imbalance. And what do I mean by low carb intake? Well, that's very individualized. Now, there does seem to be a correlation. So the more metabolic damage you have, the more kind of messed up your insulin and leptin is, those people tend to need to lower their carbs even more than someone who isn't. So that's kind of a rule of thumb. If you already have a pretty good metabolic profile, if your insulin and leptin are already close to normal or almost normal, then you probably don't need to lower them quite as much. But it's so individualized. I'm not even going to throw out any numbers because it wouldn't even be fair. But that's one thing you need to start paying attention to. And you can experiment yourself and kind of see what I like to call, what is your carb tipping point? Meaning, how many carbs are you able to consume and still achieve weight loss or still lower your hormones enough to start tapping into body fat? Okay, so the next thing that women a lot of times ask me is, how do I know if my hormones are in the right place? Like, without getting a blood test, how do I know if I am in a prime kind of position to start tapping into body fat? Well, if you are somebody who is hungry all the time, if you're somebody who needs to eat every few hours, if you're somebody who's kind of food obsessed, maybe you have kind of a sugar obsession or a sugar addiction, and you're just always kind of, when is my next meal? And when can I eat again? You are most likely not in a hormonal place to start tapping into body fat. I'm sorry to tell you that, because what would happen is if you just started trying to lower your calories from that place, you would probably be pretty grumpy. You would be hungry. You would not feel good. So just to ignore the hormones and just start lowering calories, it's just a very unpleasant experience. It doesn't mean that you can't lose weight. It's just really unpleasant, which is why a lot of people kind of give up on their diets because they feel so awful. So you really want to, before you do any sort of significant caloric deficit, you want to at least spend maybe a few weeks in a lowering your carbs and eating less frequently to kind of prime and get your body ready to efficiently start tapping into fat. So, okay, so how does wine or alcohol affect this? That's a really good question. So, there's a couple of reasons why alcohol kind of inhibits or works against us in our weight loss process. And first of all, I'm not saying you can't have it while you're trying to lose weight. I'm not saying that at all, but I want you to at least understand the science behind it, and then you can make the right choice for you. Two things about alcohol. Number one, alcohol, it takes quite a bit of, it takes a lot of kind of, I'll use this in quotes, resources from our liver to metabolize alcohol. Your liver is also what breaks down and processes body fat too. So if you are consuming a lot of alcohol, your liver is going to prioritize the metabolism and the breakdown of alcohol. That's first priority. And it's going to not really be focusing on burning body fat when it's got all this alcohol to process. So that's the first thing to remember, because alcohol is kind of seen as a toxin in the body. And so the liver is going to take that, prioritize it, and kind of forget about the body burning body fat for the time being. And then the second of all is alcohol is it's a carb, you know. So alcohol is going to increase your insulin, which puts you into fat storage mode. Now, depending on the kind of alcohol you drink, that will determine how high your insulin is going to be. So if you have a really sugary strawberry daiquiri, for example, that's going to increase your insulin a lot more than just having, like vodka and lemon juice or something like that. So there is a spectrum of sugar content in alcohol that will make a difference, but just understand too what else alcohol is doing in the body with the liver. So a lot of women, this is what I recommend for my clients, kind of decide how you want alcohol to be in your life. Is it something that you want to eliminate completely? Is it something that you want just a few drinks on the weekend? Like, what do you want your life to look like with alcohol in it? And make a plan and then stick with that plan and kind of experiment and see, is this working for me? Is it not? But there really isn't a right or wrong answer as far as should you eliminate it, should you not? That's only a decision that you can make. So the other thing I wanted to note is a lot of women kind of have this almost like PTSD around a caloric deficit. They've done so many like low calorie diets that the thought of getting into a caloric deficit, it just leaves such a bad feeling with them. And I get it, I understand that. But here's the good news. If you get your hormones in the right place, if you get your insulin and your leptin and your stress, that's another one we need to talk about is stress hormones. If you get all of those in a good place and your fat starts talking to your brain and they're communicating with each other and your brain gets the message of how much body fat you have, your appetite is going to increase or decrease automatically. So you don't even have to do any calorie counting because you're just going to get in a caloric deficit on your own. And then you aren't even hungry. You aren't having to worry about counting a bunch of calories. It just kind of happens on its own. And so I have a lot of my clients who get really get deep into fat adaptation. They will barely need to eat at all during the day, especially if I have clients that have a significant amount of weight to lose. They will get fat adapted and their appetite is almost completely shut down and they don't want food and they aren't hungry. And then the process just becomes completely effortless. And you just kind of start losing fat automatically without a lot of effort. So that's a really great place to be in. And then it doesn't even feel like you're on a diet. You're just living your life. So let me know if you have any other questions about that. The other thing too is if you're feeling a little overwhelmed and confused, like, I don't know if my hormones are in the right place, I don't know where to start, that is where working with somebody like me becomes, it's very useful because I can kind of get you started into the right place. I don't provide meal plans for my clients because they don't work, but I can give you a really great baseline of how many carbs you need and what you need to do to start to get your hormones back in the right place. So can keto strips show if you're fat adapted? Yes and no. So here's the thing about when you test your ketones, whether it's urine or blood, that is a sign. All ketones mean when they're detected in your urine and your blood, all that means is that your body is breaking down fat. But it's not telling us if that fat breakdown is from food you've just eaten that's being broke down or if it's body fat. So people out there who are just chasing ketones, that isn't always the best thing to do, because if you just ate a bunch of fat, yeah, your ketones are going to go up, but you're burning food. You're burning the food you just ate. We want you to burn body fat. So I do think that measuring ketones and ketone strips are an amazing tool, and I think you can kind of use them to kind of see what foods are getting you into ketosis, what are not, but it's not an end all be all. It's just kind of a tool to help support you in your efforts. So let me know if I didn't answer that question, or let me know if you have any questions about that. So like I said, I don't hand out meal plans to my clients, and I don't give you exact numbers, but I'll tell you, just based off of my experience of helping women with this, most women need to lower their carbs quite a bit from where they're currently at. And a lot of times they don't realize how many carbs they're consuming until they really start taking a deep look at things. And I don't think you need to count meticulously your carbs every single day, but I think to take a few days and kind of see where you're at, kind of a baseline, it can be helpful. And like I said, I don't like to throw out numbers, but just kind of based off of my experience, what I've seen is some women who have quite a bit of metabolic damage, a lot of times need to lower their carbs 50 or below, 30 below. I've even seen 20 or below grams of carbs per day is what that is before they really start seeing results. So like I said, I don't know if where you would fall, but that's kind of just based off of my experience, that's the numbers that I've seen. Really quick too, I also, because I work with women over 40 and we talk a ton about perimenopause and menopause, I wanted to just mention really quick that sex hormones do matter. So your changing sex hormones do matter to some degree when it comes to weight loss. They are not near as important as insulin or leptin, but they do play a part. So one example of that is estrogen. So when you hit perimenopause, and especially in menopause, this especially goes for menopause, your estrogen starts to decline. And when that happens, it affects kind of your insulin sensitivity in the body. So insulin and estrogen kind of have this dance, and they kind of go well together, and they just work together really well. So when you take away that estrogen, your insulin doesn't really have anything to kind of counterbalance it or to kind of sensitize it. So that is one reason why when you hit perimenopause and menopause, you start putting on weight, even if you don't do anything different than you used to. Just the sheer fact that your estrogen is declining, it is pushing you into more of an insulin resistance state, just closer on that spectrum. So that means you do not tolerate carbs the same way you did before you hit perimenopause. Your body doesn't know how to utilize those carbs as efficiently. When you have optimal estrogen, you're able to take in carbs, your body burns them and utilizes them very efficiently. Now that's not happening. Now it's more of a fat storage. Your carbs are more likely to be stored as fat. So what does that mean for you? Well, that means you may need to lower your carbs a little bit more in order to kind of keep yourself from being in that fat storage mode. And that's just one example of kind of the sex hormone changes that occur. So that's why if you're beating your head against the wall, like I'm not doing anything different than I used to do, and why am I gaining this weight? That could be one reason. Do you suggest counting carbs instead of calories? I don't. It just kind of depends. I think, maybe you could do both. I don't think there's necessarily one that's better than the other, because you do need to pay attention to your calories too. You need to be in a caloric deficit or you're not going to lose any weight. Sorry. So you need to be mindful of calories and you need to be mindful of carbs too. And I don't think you need to do it day in, day out during your weight loss process. But I think doing it occasionally, doing it if you hit a weight loss stall, doing it in the beginning to kind of get a baseline, I think counting both is useful. And then once you feel really solid about things, then you can kind of back down on that. But both matter. Both of them need to be taken into consideration. So what other questions? Please send me your questions. But like I said, in my one-on-one program with women, the beauty of my program is that it's all customized, it's individualized. So we work only on what you need in order to lose weight. Do you need to really change your hormones? Or maybe your hormones look pretty good, but maybe you're having some problems with maybe overeating, or maybe you've got kind of a snacking issue. Then we would focus a little bit less on the hormones and more on some of the overeating stuff. So it's a very effective program because we don't waste time on stuff that doesn't apply to you. So another question that a lot of women ask me is, do I have to get my hormones tested in order for this to work or in order to be successful? And the answer is no. I've had several clients that have not tested their hormones at all, and they've been very successful. Sometimes it's interesting to kind of get a baseline of where you're at. Sometimes it kind of sheds light on things. Oh, this is why I'm having problems. If you're having a lot of symptoms, I would recommend getting your blood drawn, especially if you're having hypothyroid symptoms like fatigue, hair loss, some of those classic hypothyroid symptoms. It might be worth kind of ruling that out. So it can be helpful, but it's definitely not required. I noticed this recently in perimenopause, adding carbs back in. Yeah, so I think what you're saying here is that, I think you're saying that maybe you added carbs back in. So what happened when you added carbs back in? Was it success? Were did you get the results you want? Did you not? Yeah, finding that, like I said earlier, finding your carb tipping point is really helpful. It takes a little experimentation, but some women maybe need to add a few carbs back in order to feel optimal. Maybe they need to kind of cycle in some carbs now and then in order to feel optimal. It's completely individualized. And that's one thing that I help my clients with is I'm really good at troubleshooting what your issue is. And that's the other beauty of working with a coach like me, is that I help you see what you can't see. So many women come to me and they know a ton. They know a ton about nutrition and weight loss and hormones. And so their problem isn't lack of knowledge. Their problem is that they sometimes can't see what I can see because they're in it. They're in the thick of it and they can't see the things that they can't see. So I'm really good at being able to help you find your issue, find your problem, because I'm more of an outside person looking in on the situation. And I have just a ton of experience, so that helps too. So like I said, the two main hormones you really want to look at are insulin and leptin. Those are the ones you want to focus on first. And once you really get those down, then you can start maybe looking more at sex hormones. And the final hormone that I'm really going to talk about, and then I'll go ahead and end the session here, but cortisol. So really, really quick, I want to talk about cortisol. Now, when we hit perimenopause, our progesterone starts declining. Now, progesterone is a buffer against cortisol. Now, cortisol is kind of that hormone. Well, it's the hormone that's elevated during stress. And if it's elevated for a long time, for high amounts, for long periods of time, it will inhibit weight loss because it's going to cause belly fat. It's going to cause blood sugar swings. You're going to be hungry. You're going to be hangry. So we want to make sure your cortisol is in optimal levels. Now, in our younger years, when we had optimal progesterone, we were able to buffer that cortisol. Progesterone is the buffer against cortisol. So we were able to tolerate a lot more stress and not have the side effects from it. Well, when you take away the progesterone, you have this free-flowing cortisol, going through your body, and you are less stress tolerant, which means it's like you're amplifying that cortisol in your body, and it's causing belly fat, and it's causing blood sugar swings, and it's making weight loss impossible. So it's important to minimize the stress where you can in your life. And one way to do that is to decrease the amount of either high intensity exercise, long endurance cardio. If that's something you're doing and you aren't getting weight loss results, you may want to think about backing down on that, because high intensity, long endurance cardio is going to raise your cortisol long term, chronically raise cortisol. When you do exercises like, resistance training or yoga or walking, your cortisol, it doesn't raise your cortisol. So that's another thing to think about too. The other hormone you want to consider that you're losing is progesterone. So anyway, it's simple. It's simple to lose weight. You just need to balance your hormones and get into a caloric deficit. So that it's a simple concept, but it's not always easy getting into that sweet spot. And that's where I come in to really help you. So I specialize in helping women who already know quite a bit about weight loss. They've already tried everything. They know what's not working, and they're frustrated and they're beating their head against the wall. And then that's where I am really able to come in and help you troubleshoot and help really come up with a clear plan for you. So if you are interested in enrolling in my program or finding out more, there's a million different ways you can go to the link in my bio, and there's a bunch of different options of how to learn more about me. I've got a lot of free content on my website too that you can refer to. But I understand, ladies, how frustrating it can be to be feeling like you're doing everything right and nothing is working. And it's really starting to affect other areas of your life too. Your self-confidence has gone down. You feel like it's impacting like your social life or how you feel about yourself or your relationships. And it's so frustrating. I completely get it. But I want you to know one thing, because this is where a lot of women feel like that there's something wrong with them. There's something wrong with them, and therefore they're just going to have to accept where they're at for the rest of their life. I am here to tell you that is not true. Your body knows how to lose weight. I promise you 100% your body knows how to lose weight. It is impossible to have a body that doesn't know how to burn body fat. It's impossible. So it's just a matter of getting you to that place or making a few tweaks to get you to that place where it happens. Your body knows what to do. You just need to kind of support it and kind of move it along. So hopefully that gives you some words of encouragement if you feel sometimes like you're broken or that there's something wrong or other people can lose weight, but you can't. You've already tried everything. Just know that that is not true. That is not true at all. So, all right. I'll give you another maybe 20, 30 seconds here to ask me any questions that you need, or if you have any questions about my program or how I help women, please ask questions. But the hormones are huge. The hormones, getting those hormones in the right place are huge. And sometimes women, when women hear the term hormones, a lot of times they just think sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and they forget about the hormones that matter even more, which is leptin and insulin and cortisol. Those matter more. So we really want to focus on those first instead of just always kind of being narrow-minded on the sex hormones. So hormones matter. The calories matter too. We cannot forget about calories. Many of you have tried the keto diet and failed because you weren't paying attention to the calories. You were just eating fat bombs all day, which was probably getting your hormones in an okay spot, but it's not going to get your It's not going to get you in the caloric deficit, because fat is, while fat's very good for you, fat is very calorically dense. So if you're eating a bunch of fat, butter, bulletproof coffees, and fat bombs, it's just that fat that you aren't burning is just going to get stored into body fat. So that's the one pitfall I think a lot of women run into with keto. So anyway, like I said, if you want to find out more about me, what I do, how that all works, click the link in my bio. But otherwise, I hope this live was helpful for you as far as kind of explaining why the hormonal balance and the caloric deficit need to both happen at the same time. So, all right, I will let you all go, and we'll talk to you all soon. All right, bye-bye.